Hey everyone! Thought I would talk about questions today, the mechanics of questions. So I think this little topic is so important, mostly because I learned so much about it through failing, really. A failing of asking questions, and I naturally ask a lot of questions, but I realized that I don't know how to ask questions properly, actually. So I spent a lot of time reflecting on what questions are and how they work and what it means. And the reason for that is mostly that in yoga, well, the concept of self-inquiry is like a huge deal. I mean, that's what it's all about. Even in the Baha'i writings, like meditation is the definition of meditation is to pose a question to your spirit and wait for its answer. So in that sense, it's important to know how to ask a question or like what it is, how to kind of like work with it in a sense. So let me just share with you how I used to ask questions. I would actually or in class, oh my god, in class I would just be firing questions like one after another and leaving no space for answers, basically. So I think it's pretty obvious, and I think other people would be much more aware of this than I was, and so even though like it might sound very simple, but how many times is it that we ask a question and that we actually wait for an answer, or that we're actually asking a question? So a lot of times we're not actually asking a question. We're just making a judgmental, snarky little underhand cut, like kind of like it's more like a comment than a question. So that leads to point number two. The first point is to have space, to have provide like an area, an empty area within yourself to be able to receive an answer. Okay, check number one. Two, so about the snarkiness of the comments. So it's important to know that there's also a spirit with that question. Like, one of the prerequisites that I absolutely love about reading spiritual writings from the Baha'i writings is that it's not a requirement for you to be literate for you to read spiritual scriptures. But you have like a list of other spiritual requirements needed in order for you to be able to retain it. So the first is purity of mind. And or in a sense like those snarky comments, it doesn't have a pure motive. You know, you're not really asking a question so that you can learn. You're asking it so that you can just be like, hey, you don't know as much as I do. You know, like it's just not coherent with the spirit of it. So in an example, as in a spiritual context or in a self-inquiry context, if let's say for instance the spirit and why you wanted to know something was buried under like ego or buried under some other like it's not sincere in the sense that sincerity, truthfulness would need to first be under there, of course, and then the ego or whatever. But like the aspect of like the reason why you pose a question is sincerity is to be truthful in your intentions of wanting to know. So what does that mean? So you need to kind of check yourself as to why you're actually asking this question. Like, do you want to know? Do you want to know the answer? And then it's like wondering like, okay, what is a question in which it would be coherent with the way you want to know? You want to know something. So one is that you need to have the space. You have to provide the area, their circumference of it, so that a question, an answer for a question can come. If you don't have a space, you're basically your cup is full. Like there's not much space in that sense. So you're just kind of like there's not much, at least in this cup, for you to put into it, right? You would need to dump it out to be like, okay, what do I truly want to know? And forget all the things that you kind of had in there. This is dandelion coffee, so it's wonderful. Anyways, but yeah, so to provide that space and then to also have awareness as to the spirit in which you're asking the question. So I talked about purity of motives to have it. And then the second prerequisite that you need to have when you're asking a question is purity of motives. Actually, in reality, in the Baha'i writings, these prerequisites are not specifically for questions, but they're prerequisites for consultation. So in order to come together to talk and for you to learn and for there to be the spark of light and or discovery, for you to like collectively progress to another level, purity of motive, you can't go into the meeting without this purity of motive or chastity of mind or wanting to really have, the other one was being attracted to the fragrance of the spirit, which was really beautiful in describing what that even means in the book about consultation. Someone summarized it really well. But basically just having the receptiveness of being attracted to the kingdom. So when you're inquiring your spirit, one needs to know that you need the help of the kingdom on high in order to get you there. So this goes for whether or not you are religious, spiritual, or hate God. All of the above requirements is the same. So it's like, for instance, even if you didn't believe in God, but you wanted to question or you wanted to know whether or not it is there, it would require a genuine question, not one that be like, you go into the conversation or the questioning period with a snarky, like that doesn't provide a space for you to receive a genuine answer because you don't have the appropriate spirit accompanied to receive an answer. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, in order to receive an answer that you want, the question needs to be within that spirit realm. Needs to be within the mojo and the juju beans. Like, if somebody asks you a question, why are you doing that? In this tone, nobody wants to answer you, you know? Like, but if you're saying that, if you have a sense of humility and you show a sense of receptiveness, of being like, I genuinely want to know what it is you're doing, or what you are, or what I am, and how I am the way I am. These need to come from sincerity. So truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues because of this. So it needs to be truthfully genuine in that you want to know. A lot of people say that they don't believe in God and they just leave it there. Like, there is no question about it. And that's fine. That's totally fine if you no longer want to step further. However, it's not the same as being like, I'm not sure whether or not I believe in this universe, in this God, in whichever word it is even that you have a difficulty with expressing. Like, even if it's your soul or your spirit, or like if these are not words that you really identify with, all of it is cool. No worries. But what is not cool for you to stop the questioning, like maybe even ask the question of why it is that you feel uncomfortable about the word God, or why it is that you feel uncomfortable with the idea of something of a higher power, or what is it about the word soul? What is its association that I've learned in my life in this context in which I don't resonate with it. I don't really feel it. So it's like, also in addition, because questions are attached to words, they're attached to the mental realm. And like, words and language, it changes over time. So it's part of the changing realm as well. It is not part of the eternal realm. Whereas your self-inquiry, you're trying to ask about the part of yourself that is never changed, in the sense that it's part of an eternal plan sort of situation, and you're trying to learn about what that even is. Or even the thing that I'm talking about right now, if it doesn't make sense to you, to ask questions about it. To be like, what is she talking about? I'm like, that's not how I see it. What is a way that you see it? So the questions don't stop. But, so there's no, end point to the question. But then, so in the midst of just asking questions in your life and how you want to receive answers, it's important to reflect on those necessary qualities of just doing that process alone. So I've been in a couple classes where I've asked so many questions in an anxious way. It's almost like I'm so anxious to know that it's just been it's kind of filled with this sort of heaviness. It's intense. Even for the other person to want to answer me, they're just oh my god, Nahal's so intense about it. She means it's not even there's no energy for it to come inside because I'm so intense about it. So whether or not you're doing this in terms of you're in a group setting and you're asking questions, or you're doing it to self-inquire about yourself, to have an awareness about the intensity, the energetics, the energy that comes with that, it's important to note in your mind, to be aware of. The reason why we ask these questions is partially because we're anxious, or just we don't know what's going on in the world and we're scared, or we don't understand something, and so that causes some disruption in a way. So, but to be aware of it and not let it control the question in itself. So it's to be really picky about the questions that you pose, either to other people or to yourself, and the nature and why is it you pose it in that certain way. So to have a bit more of a thinking of how a question affects another person or affects yourself. So this is one area in which we can just learn to kind of improve a little bit more. So a lot of people, when they think about meditation in the form of asking a question to your spirit and waiting for its answer, they don't have the necessary. It's important to, I even ask the question, how am I supposed to meditate? What are the necessary qualities in which I can appropriately receive and give? And so I wrote a blog on that's titled A Receptacle and a Font. Font as in fountain. So you have the fountain that's just overflowing and just kind of always coming out and sort of thing. And a receptacle is something that receives it. With all fountains, there is a receptacle to receive that overflowingness. And that's where balance is. That's why it doesn't overflow and go outwards and destroy the surroundings and life around it. So within a fountain, you have already those dualities of there's an ever-flowing movement, and then there's the receptacle that is always there to receive. So in our relationship with our own souls, when we're trying to inquire, or even with God or the universe, for us it's important to be that receptacle, to empty ourselves in a sense, so that you have space to receive something new. Quite purely on a mechanical level, that just makes sense. If you're so full of something, you can't kind of receive anything. So if you remember the line in the quote in Avatar, where the guy who's the foreigner, he goes into the camp, and then the mama healer kind of walks out and she says, "Let me cure your insanity and see whether or not you can actually learn anything." And first she says, "I can't teach a cup that's full." Or there's no point in teaching a cup that's full. And I mean, this analogy goes with so many different things. Like, a lot of times, I mean, so many sages have given this example as like someone really seeking the truth, but then also not having the proper mechanics. And it would be as simple as you go to visit a sage like for tea, and the sage is like pouring you tea and stuff, and the person, the inquirer, would ask a question, and the sage would literally demonstrate in action, just continuously pouring in a cup this small, but constantly pouring, and just being like, well, there's no space for me to fill it because your cup is like this. Your cup is full. You're not asking even questions from an empty cup. You're asking it from a full cup. So even having those little tiny awarenesses is important to know, and to know that if you're not receiving an answer, perhaps the mechanics, not always, but also the other thing is to give enough time to be able to either hear a response in your mind's eye or in your surroundings. So how many times is it that you have a question about something in life? You even ask it as like a whisper. It's not even really like a question. You're like, I want to ask this question. But that you're just like, oh, I wonder what this means, or like what this is about. And then later on in your life, a couple days pass, a few days later, someone will bring something up related to this. This is a part of the answering of it, whether or not it's within yourself or in the outside realm. So this answer could come in various forms. And what ultimately, the reason why we meditate and to be aware is to also to be able to recognize these signs and why they happen. It's like it blows one's mind of how quickly these answers come when you actually have the correct mechanics in which to receive it and give it, and all of these things. So yeah, definitely try it out. So we talked about silence, providing a space for these questions, whether or not you're posing a question to someone else, to give them time to answer to you. Because even if they were to answer immediately, that means they've already thought about it at another period of time, and they're just regurgitating, repeating what they learned in the past, rather than using the present opportunity to be able to answer anew according to the context in which it has provided for. So to also not rush silence. So silence, I mean, there's so many different ways that I could talk about this, but essentially it's like you need to be comfortable with it. Silence. And not a lot of people are. People are always willing to fill silence, and always either by osmosis. As soon as you kind of like empty a space, something else comes to fill it up. Like literally. Like if you think about a spontaneous reaction, like a gas that is heated up, over time, what it does is just disperses and becomes even more chaotic and cools down. And so that is a natural process that occurs rather than an active process that occurs in a controlled environment. If you had a gas and you were to release it, and you would pressurize it, put it in a container, and for you to kind of observe the molecules, they would not disperse as quickly, and so you're kind of watching the molecules to see like where things are going, where questions are going, where the answers are coming from. So also the other thing with meditation and asking this question, sometimes we ask a question and then we lose focus. And it's important if that happens. It's okay, totally okay, because as a humanity, we require discipline and education and practice to be able to focus on one point. So if you ask a question, especially internally, to pause and wait for the answer. But if you lose focus, it's totally fine. Just gently bring your attention back to the question and maybe pose it again to just refocus your mind on that question again. But also to observe those thoughts that make you wander away. And maybe that is part of an answer, but maybe it's too far. But to bring it back and to see to just constantly focus on the point, which is the question that you're wanting to know. And to also like kind of track these questions so that you know you're progressing, is to have the awareness to know that you've actually improved from step 1 to step 2. So initially your question might be something very simple, and then you get the answer, and then you think of another question, and then you get the answer, and then you think of another question, but then somewhere along the lines you feel like, oh, none of my questions were answered, and you don't realize that actually to even get to that question which you felt like didn't have an answer, you've already progressed so much. So to have this awareness that to have a way of tracking your questions, essentially. And so yeah, so space, silence, the spirit in which you ask the question, to know the necessary, the qualities of the listener as well as the giver of questions. So if it's within yourself, you're the person asking the question, and the answer is coming within your mind and within the spirit. Your spirit is answering back to you. Like a lot of times, like this, people say the definition of wisdom is literally speaking with your own spirit, is because information can be gained through two ways. One is through books and knowledge, and the other is through direct perception, which we all have this kind of like this unending, unlimited vault within ourselves. And it just takes the necessary keys and the appropriate mechanics to be able to receive the answers to those questions that we want. And so I encourage you 100%, if you have a question, to just pursue it, hopefully with the necessary qualities that you need in order to receive the answer or to recognize the answer, and just keep at it. I have never had a question that has not been answered. That's all I have to say. Whether it's a question about life, the answer has always come in various different ways, either through a person sharing this with me, either through a TV show, or either through my own mind in meditation, or reading an article somehow that came into my life, and then, whoa, like I had this question, it just came up. So, to never be despondent, in a sense, that when you have a question, and you have the necessary qualities to also be able to receive it, it will come to you. It will come. So ask any and every question that you want to know. In this life, anything that you don't understand, study it. Like, study it rigorously the way you were taught how to study math, sciences, like English, like the way you would have to write an introduction. Like, be rigorous with your questions as well. So I wish you luck in asking questions. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up or a like or a love, depending on where it is you're watching this. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. And hopefully I'll be able to share with you some insights. Either way, I'm here as a receptacle for you to pose your questions, and we'll see where the questions go together, basically, or where it leads us. The answers, whether it's through me or through a book, or I don't know. So yeah, Wanjaba.